Bitcoiners are fighting again. We're fighting about some obscure technical thing, but we might also be fighting about a cultural thing. It's actually not super clear. So I brought Udi Wertheimer, co-founder of the Taproot Wizards and famous Bitcoin provocateur, onto the show to help us explain what's happening at a technical level, but then what's really happening at a broader cultural level. Bitcoin Season 2 is brought to you by Arch Network, the platform building gridless apps on Bitcoin. More on Arch later on the show. Let's kick it off. Udi, quick update. A lot of the listeners here are probably not actually very hardcore Bitcoiners, so they may not know whether to love or hate you. Who are you?
I think regardless of your tribe, you should always begin with hate. You know, always assume hate. Who am I? I'm a Bitcoin maxi cult survivor. Have been middle management roles in the cult for many years. Eventually, I decided there's probably more for me in this world, and I started making JPEGs.
You were promoted. You like all middle management. You were promoted to your level of incompetence.
Yeah. And started making JPEGs in protest of the lack of promotion opportunities. I think these days I'm mostly known for JPEGs, I guess.
Yeah, you've been a provocateur. I think on the previous episode, now almost a year ago, you give some context on your path and story in Bitcoin, but you are now the face of Taproot Wizards. But you've also really chimed in on the Bitcoin technical discussion, both at a narrow level and a meta level. And I think that's what we're going to just jump into today. And for the listener, we are kind of ripping this live. I'm kind of seat of my pants here because this is a fluid situation. The past week, the Bitcoin ecosystem, those of us who are terminally online, erupted into argument. And Udi, you actually remained you didn't say a whole lot on this until recently, and you chose not to comment too much on it directly, but I'm going to invite you to help talk me through this. We're going to start talking narrowly about what the debate is. Then we're going to talk a little bit bigger about some of the other conversations. And then we're going to zoom really far back and talk about Bitcoin from a meta view of how do we move forwards and what do we do? So let's start with the op return debate. Can you try to summarize the op return debate as fairly as you can?
You know, it's funny. Op return is this thing that has been controversial since the beginning. If I remember my history correctly, I think it really started as sort of a compromise. I don't think op return was in there in the beginning.
Wasn't.
Yeah, and I think people, I don't know if it might have been the counterparty protocol that has been doing I think they've been using the multi-sig construction to put the kind of on-chain data that they needed on-chain. And they were using, there was the native multi-sig. I guess it still exists. There's the native multi-sig opcode, which nobody uses, and allows you to do multi-sig without wrapping it in P2SH. We're not going to discuss that. That's boring. But the point is they abused that in order to get data into the chain for their protocol, which, their protocol was really conceptually similar to ordinals and runes and BRC20 and so on. It wasn't implemented in the same way, but the concept was similar. And I guess people were upset about it. And I think that was the context for the creation of op return, which was kind of a compromise. It was kind of okay, people are going to do this, so let's at least have them do it in a way that is a little more responsible. And I think, I might be messing up the details, but I think what ended up happening is that, they made this op return thing, but they also limited the size, and the counterparty people were mad that it was too small. and I think did not end up using it. I don't know. And ever since then, and again, I might be like mixing things up, but ever since then it keep being brought up again and again that the limit is maybe too small, and people are obviously, misusing and abusing other properties of Bitcoin to get data in there. So maybe we should let them do op return more cleanly. And whenever someone brought it up, and I think Peter Todd is one person who kept bringing this up every few years, because I think Peter is the kind of guy that doesn't really shy away from controversy. It looks like he might enjoy it, and I can understand that. I feel like whenever like Bitcoin core developers are like think that something is the technically right thing to do, but they fear the consequences of saying it, they're like, "Hey, Peter Todd, can you do something about this?"
He's the social release valve.
Yeah.
That's why he's still around. Sorry, Peter, I don't mean to diminish it, but yeah. So
in a good way.
what you're describing is this happened over a decade ago.
Yeah, over a decade ago, and over time it kept happening. Like the topic kept being brought up again, and I think every time it did, there was this big backlash. Although I feel like this time the big backlash is probably stronger. Well, it's stronger than it was 2 years ago. It's maybe not as strong as it was 10 years ago. Everyone was obsessed about it 10 years ago. Anyways, I think that probably if I had to look, I don't like the way that people seem to ascribe malice to everyone around this. I don't think so. I think everyone is being genuine, more or less. And I think, or at least they're doing what they think is right. And I think that it seems to me that people who are involved in a Bitcoin core code base really think that the limit on op return is kind of, one, unproductive, doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Two, it's like hard to maintain. Three, it might create some bad behavior. So I think they genuinely want to fix it. But, it reminds me a little bit of, remember when, a bunch of folks in Ornals wanted to remove the inscription numbers because there were bugs involved, and
I was one of those people. Yeah. I am very much, and I'll say, I was totally right, but also I don't die on this hill because I'm in the interest of at least being pragmatic and moving things forward. So
yeah, I think that's exactly it, right? Like I think that the position of the Bitcoin core developers, at least those that have voiced their opinion on this, is technically correct. Like they're right. This thing is the limits are not helping. Removing them is probably not going to make things worse in a very material way. It's probably going to make things better. However, people have like strong feelings about this, and similarly with the inscription numbers, especially at that point where you guys wanted to remove them, it didn't matter anymore, right? Like it was over. But some people just have like emotions about these numbers, and so sometimes the technical argument is not the only argument to be had, I guess. And I think it's actually quite similar.
Let me tell you about one of the most slept on opportunities in crypto. Arch is building fast, composable DeFi apps on Bitcoin. Arch apps tap into the OG blockchain with by far the most liquidity and best brand in crypto. I've known the team for over a year. The tech they're building is solid, and they are racing towards mainnet. There's dexes like Saturn, meme coins on funkybit.fun, instant loans on Cha-Ching, and so much more. Plus, they're rewarding testnet users, so join me in trying out Arch while it's still early. So the listener here is probably not going to fully understand like the details, and maybe we can just kind of skip past those, but maybe it'd be fair to characterize that this suggestion to remove the limits is it's the better technical thing to do. And pushback against it is largely emotional. But maybe that's not really the point to what's going on. Maybe we can broaden the scope here a bit, and we'll just go one layer bigger And we don't have to stay on this too long, but the topic of spam on Bitcoin. You and I are the largest advocates of putting these JPEGs on Bitcoin. So we're not impartial. We love these things and our bags are tied to these things. Yours probably more so than mine, but that's, regardless. Let's talk about just the topic of and arguments of spam on Bitcoin. I'm going to let you take this wherever you want. How do you want to respond to the listener who maybe is neutral to JPEGs, but also doesn't understand why Bitcoiners are letting that happen? And why, how do you respond to this person? Now, you've done it a bunch before, but I'll invite you to kind of reprise this.
I'm probably not going to reprise. I'm probably going to have a new position now.
Okay.
I think, this might surprise people. So first of all, people love bringing JPEGs into this op return argument because it makes things more emotional and dramatic. But honestly, no, I don't know of any JPEG person who asked for this. We don't need this. And frankly, the crazy thing about this is I can say this openly. I can tell you exactly what I'm going to tell you. And someone might think, why is he confessing? But if he confesses, they're going to stop him. But it's it doesn't matter because these people are so stupid. The only thing that we would possibly care about as JPEG spammers we don't need any changes. We're good. The only thing we care about is for people to be upset about it. That's the only thing we need. The more people are upset, the more people are riling up and crying, the better our JPEGs do. The more attention that the JPEGs get. This one is particularly great because we didn't even need to do anything. I mean, it just happened on its own. So if you want to stop and I had a thread about this 2 years ago, and I said hey guys, if you want to stop ordinals, just leave it alone, just let it be. And it doesn't matter how many times I'm going to say it. It's not gonna. They're not gonna get it. They're gonna keep making the same mistakes again and again to our benefit. But really, the op return thing is not about JPEGs, right? And I think the reason that it got into, I honestly, I think all of it is ridiculous. I think both sides are being ridiculous. The reason this was becoming an issue is because someone watched a talk by Citrea, which is a hypothetical talk about a hypothetical white paper, but it's something that's not even implemented. And they said that hypothetically, if they had op return, they would have maybe done something differently, which would have amounted to nothing, right? In the grand scheme of the usage of the network, it would have been very small. And they don't even want it that bad. They're whatever, we can do something else. It's not an issue. Nobody has an issue. And then the JPEGers don't care at all, right?
Yeah.
But there is, so you might ask why, since we know this is a controversial issue, why bring it up? If it's not really, doesn't really matter. So why are let's do something else, That being said, I think that the filterers this time, they have a point, because there's I thought about this a lot. You remember when Ornal started, Luke tried to make the limits more strict so that you cannot do inscriptions, is something that he wanted to do back then. And that is something that I'm very confident cannot work. So you cannot, if there is demand for creating inscription for whatever reason, and that demand already exists and people are already doing it, then the relay policy cannot do anything to stop that. It's not possible. There's too much money involved. There's too much demand. People will figure it out. You can't fix that with a relay policy. However, relay policies are effective for preventing things that are currently not in demand. And that might sound stupid, but they also prevent them from becoming in demand, right? So, had Casey not figured out this trick to put JPEGs into transactions, then it wouldn't have demand, right? Like, because maybe someone would have thought up like, oh, I can do this by sending it directly to miners, but nobody would bother if it's so hard to do. So it is true that if you relax the policies, people are going to try to play with it. There's no doubt. I mean, they already are. And so like it will move from nobody's using it to some people are using it. And then there's, maybe it will flop. Maybe it will not, maybe it will not stick around. Maybe it will not have the same excitement that Ordinals had, but people will definitely try. So the filters people are right about that. Relaxing policies is a risk of just encouraging spam. And of course, they're helping to encourage it. I would say that if it was a silent removal of the relay policy that nobody talked about, then nobody would have cared. But because they're making such a big deal about it, then maybe there's going to be like a little cultural zeitgeist here. It could happen. So really both sides are being quite ridiculous in my opinion.
In classic Udi fashion, that's an angle that I think a lot of people would not have expected you to say, because you side in some part on that particular point with the filters and on their criticism of removing this policy. Really,
I'm just trying to be honest here. I think.
But this gets into, one, I don't know if you said this explicitly, or implied it, but you're talking about Bitcoin Core, maybe making a blunder here.
Mm-hmm.
If they wish, in fact, to continue to be the dominant monolithic client. And this can get into really the broad scope, the meta commentary on Bitcoin that I think you really probably want to direct towards, how do you view, do you think Core made a blunder with this specific, handling this specific topic, or do you think this is really the culmination of a kind of a building, rising, I want to use softer language, a rising pushback against Core?
I don't want it to sound like I'm against those people. I think they're good people. I think they're doing good work, which is probably underappreciated. I think they mean well. And I think, really they're just trying to do what they've done for a while, and maybe a little bit surprised as to why there's more and more pushback. But I think, Bitcoin, obviously, the last few years grew a lot and changed a lot in its social structure. I think a lot of the newcomers, I know that most of the newcomers to Bitcoin, they probably don't know what Bitcoin Core is. They probably never heard that name. And if at all, then their introduction, and most the new blood in Bitcoin is the MicroStrategy maxis, I think. They might be completely oblivious to this.
They don't even know this conversation is happening.
Yeah. But it would have been, it would have been powerful if they did know. And the previous cohort before them probably also is kind of just doesn't know what Bitcoin Core is. It hasn't been introduced to these people. If we think we've both been in Bitcoin for a while and we're thinking Bitcoin Core in the early days, it's we're thinking Peter Will and Greg Maxwell, and we've been following their threads and their stories and their whatever. And that's for anyone who joined after 2017, 18, 19, that does not exist. They don't know these people at all. And their perception of Bitcoin Core is very different. And I think where Bitcoin Core kind of fucked up is they failed to create trust within everyone who joined Bitcoin in the last 6 years. They just didn't bother doing that. And I think they were trying to go off of or maybe didn't notice, right, that the old Bitcoin Core brand just doesn't carry the weight that it used to. And that's a problem, because what that means is that people who do have a platform in Bitcoin can misdirect people to believe different things about Bitcoin Core, because their constituents have never heard of Bitcoin Core before. So they're going to hear it from their favorite influencer, and whatever that person says is going to be considered the truth. And Bitcoin Core just doesn't have any representation in that discussion. And we're seeing that again and again. When Arnold started, the way that mainstream media, not mainstream, but crypto mainstream media covered the Luke stuff was they said Bitcoin Core developer wants to censor Arnold, right? Because he's whatever. People know him as a Bitcoin Core developer. Now, Bitcoin Core, most of the contributors, I would imagine, were probably furious about this because they don't consider him to be a Bitcoin Core contributor, at least not an active, productive one. So, so they were probably furious about their position being misrepresented. And that happens all the time. And of course, now you're going to see a lot of people just saying that they're evil, they're working for the NSA, they're like trying to destroy Bitcoin from within. And if they don't have their own voice, then people are going to believe that. I think that's the biggest fuck up. They just don't have, I think they don't have any social capital.
They don't have enough podcasters, kind of unironically.
Yeah. And it's not the most important thing to have podcasters, but you need to have some voice, and they have none. I think that is, and so in a similar way, I think it's a two-way street, right? So they also don't know what other people are thinking. They're like completely disconnected from the rest of the Bitcoin community.
This is the ivory tower accusation.
Yes, although I think that's not why it's happening. I think that they're like, again, that assumes some sort of malice or whatever. I think they're just like trying to do their job and probably didn't notice that somewhere in the last 5 years things changed, right? But yeah, I think, I think it's becoming, especially because of this recent backlash, I think what's becoming clear to people, like they can no longer hide it, is my point. Like before, most people in the ecosystem either didn't know what Bitcoin Core was, or they were like assuming, oh, there are some smart developers somewhere who are doing smart things and they'll tell us what to do when the time comes. And I think now the mask is off. Like people are like, something like they're this isn't a magical group of people. They're human. They have issues like the rest of us. There's some organization problems there. There's some like miscommunication. And what that means is that a lot of people are smelling blood, I think. So I think that's why suddenly a lot of kind of OG influencers are coming out of the woodwork and throwing accusations around, because people are like, well, maybe there's a little bit of a vacuum here. Which, none of this is surprising to me. But I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. And there's many, man, luckily everyone hates me, so no one's going to listen to me saying this. But if they did, they'd be so mad. I think that Greg Maxwell, for example, you've seen him. Yeah. Showing
and for the
up.
listener, Greg Maxwell is on the Mount Rushmore of Bitcoin devs. He is like one of the like 3 most influential people who's not Satoshi.
Yeah, he is. And, he stayed away from anything Bitcoin development related for years. And, you would find him on some forums online talking broadly about Bitcoin topics. But suddenly, once this op return thing broke out, he's suddenly very active on the GitHub repository and on other forums trying to argue for the op return, for removing the limits on op return. To me, that signals a pretty clear feeling of weakness. Like, it feels like, oh, okay, I'd better like come in and save the day because these guys are not handling it well. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, it's an interesting observation in that Greg Maxwell and his comments on it certainly influenced the opinions of several major talking heads. Like I use Stefan Livera as an example, who was kind of publicly walking through it back and forth. And Stefan came down pretty hard after the Greg post on here's my opinion, and it's Greg's. We saw similar things like that, but what appears not to have happened is that I'd say the pleb or the average person, which is basically the scenario
because they
described,
don't know who Greg Maxwell is,
have totally unimpacted.
Yeah. So I think, if I had to guess, I think Greg is looking at this and he's like, well, these guys are not handling the situation very well. He's been through this before. He knows that these kind of political debacles can end up being pretty costly. And he's like, okay, hopefully if I voice my opinion now, and he hadn't voiced his opinion on anything, that people need to realize he has been very quiet for a very long time. Suddenly shows up. I think he's thinking, well, maybe if I voice my opinion on it helps tilt the tables a little bit. But I think if I had to guess, I think that people in core are kind of panicking right now. And that's not to say that the up return PR will not get merged. It probably will be. It probably will, go through. But the question is what happens after that. And I think they're losing a lot of points for sure.
So let's imagine the happy path. You've always been very good at saying, here's what I think, and then nobody ever does it. What's the happy path playbook for core to recapture, I'd say, the hearts and minds of people? Maybe, I know this is probably not necessarily your position or your views, but I want to throw it at you. Like if you were Core's kind of strategist and marketing, although they don't have one, like it's a group of people unofficially contributing to the same project. But like if you were gonna come in and suggest like how to get a hold of things and redirect towards a positive, unified discourse.
Yeah, look, I mean, I like you said, Core doesn't have those functions, and I think the first thing that would need to happen is Core needs to have a hierarchy. But whatever, that is probably not going to convince anyone about that right now. I think what I would do is probably say something like, okay, we've heard you guys. We're not going to merge this for the next 6 months. This is what we want to do. We think it's right, but we want to have a conversation about it, even though we think you're wrong. And for the next 6 months, we're going to try to build a little more support around this. And this will probably sound annoying to the Core side because they might say, well, we've already delayed this once or twice or 3 times. And like at some point we need to, but like, yeah, delaying it is not enough. You need to also do something at a time in the time between delaying it and trying it again. So I would delay that again. And I would find someone who is definitely not one of the code contributors to Bitcoin Core because they're software engineers, but I would find someone, and there's so many Bitcoin influencers who are begging for a job. So like just find one of those and have them, literally make daily 30-second TikTok style videos for Twitter to just generally talk about, hey, this is what happened. Maybe not daily, weekly. This is what happened in Bitcoin Core this week, and this is what we're working on, and this is just in general what people are thinking about, and make it approachable to human beings as opposed to, engineers. There is some cool material that people are creating, like I don't remember what it's called. There's like semi-regular spaces that they're doing sometimes.
Yeah, there's like Bitcoin OpTech, which is generally the go-to place.
Yeah.
And I, as an industry reporter, cover some things they do. But again, like I also, am in the intention game, and that naturally does not garner much attention. So it's like,
so I think, something like OpTech, if I had to guess, there's probably like 50 readers to that thing that are reading it every week. And they probably get a lot of information out of it. It is good if you're professional, but for the people who aren't professionals, who are just in the Bitcoin community and they want to know what this organization, they want to know that they're not NSA agents, and they, because that's the thing they're worried about. You need to build trust with those people. And the way to do that is not to throw technical jargon at them. That's obviously not going to work. So I would say the thing that is missing the most is some sort of a connection between this group of people and the Bitcoin community. And I would work on that for 6 months. And then, I think what it looks like is probably like Tech Talk style videos that just cover in a simple way what they're working on, what they're thinking, what would happen if op return is not changed, what happens if it does change, why are people so interested in this? Like, have a voice of your own that is not controlled by someone else. It's probably not going to be the most popular form of content on the internet, but I'm sure it can do better than OpTech. So I would focus on that. I would create a dialogue. Every organization, every brand is doing this in the 21st century, and Bitcoin Core needs to do this too. And hopefully when they reach 6 months from today, there will be enough people. Like, the problem they have, there's always going to be people against anything, but the problem they have is they don't have enough supporters. What you would want to see is a lot of people will also say, no, I mean, these guys are working their ass off and they're doing their best and they've helped in so many ways, and they enumerate all the great thing that Bitcoin Core has done. And if they, they made the right call on so many things, and I think they're doing the right call on this too. You need people who say that, but there's none. Because I think there's just this sort of relationship doesn't exist. It does exist with, for example, Ocean Pool. Ocean Pool has a bunch of fans that, like, basically fanboys that think that Luke is, the Messiah, and they think that everything that he says is genius. And it's good to have that. It's good to have that. And I think Bitcoin Core should have that too. And it should, preferably it is built mostly on honesty and on actual true technical arguments and not on bullshit. But regardless, it needs to happen. So that's what I would do. And I think it can work. I think if they don't do that though, this is going to be one of the last things that they do.
So, I mean, that's a tall ask, because, they're typically very technically inclined. I use the word both, in a positive and a negative way. It's very technocratic. So, this would be kind of a pretty big pivot and ask to take a more forward stance to, like, this type of communication. But
but there's organizations like, Brink, Chain Code, HRF, a bunch of orgs that support developers. They don't only have, Spiral. They don't only have developers. They also have, operations people, and they have, I don't know, that's it. But but they could.
Bitcoin OpTech is part. I think it's run by Brink. I think Mike Schmidt is the guy who
and that is great. I mean, OpTech should continue. It is a great tool, but it has a different type of audience. And I think one or multiple of these organizations that I named could hire. I'm not kidding. Like, there are genuinely so many Bitcoin influencers looking for a job. Just hire them. Some of them know what they're doing. Hire them, tell them those are the things that we want people to know, and they'll do work of some degree of quality that is better than the existing,
So what's the happy path if Core does not do this? What's like or is it just different paths of pain and frustration and
I
further
don't
fracturing.
see a way to, like, whatever happens, if they merge this, which I think is the more likely scenario, there's going to be a ton of backlash. I mean, the backlash will continue. There's going to be more deterioration of trust. And next time they try to do something, it will be even more difficult. People have been talking about CTV and obviously CAT and stuff. And I don't see that happening through Core until this is resolved. Like, they can't, Core, I think a bunch of people at Core were hoping to do GCC, Great Consensus Cleanup. No chance. I mean, look, when I heard of it first, I said no chance like 2 months ago and 3 months ago too, for this reason, because my belief was once you try, you're going to find out that people hate you. You just don't know it yet, but you're going to find out. And now they already know that people hate them. Like, how exactly can you imagine? They pushed this through, half of the community is up in arms, and then they show up and say, yeah, we're going to do GCC. Like, who's going to trust that? Nobody. Even though there's nothing wrong with it, right? It's a technically sound software. Anyways, so I think that's what's going to happen if they're going to try to go through with it, which is probably, if I had to guess, is probably what's going to happen. If they change their mind and don't merge it, but also don't do anything to strengthen the link to the community, then they're just losing their ability to do things, right? Like, everyone learns that whenever they want to do anything, you just yell at them and then they won't do it. So that's the conundrum. It's not good for the rest of the community either, because again, like I said, I really want to see OpCat happening. I really want to see CTV happening. There's a lot of things that I want to see happening, and they couldn't possibly happen through Core if Core doesn't rise up to the challenge here. So
I want to wrap this up because I know you've got a real job doing wizardly tasks.
Presumably, yeah.
Something like that. If you're listening to this, you don't know that Udi wants OpCat, you can go to their website and read all about it, read everything he said. But Udi, what does the community do? People are unhappy. What are productive things for us to do? What are productive things for us to throw ourselves into? Some of us want change. Some of us want no change. Some of us have specific favorite opcodes. Some have specific favorite softworks. Like, what do we do?
I think that the core issue is that, Bitcoin Core is kind of detached, and I don't see them currently improving the situation. Maybe this will cause them to improve it. There is an option, though, that if they don't, maybe the community can kind of do it for them. Like, there could be, and I've seen a little bit of that. I've seen some attempts to, from people to try to explain and create content around this without being controversial. I think there's enough people being controversial about this. We're not going to change them. But I think what is lacking is some kind of level-headed discussion about this. And yeah, so one thing that people can, the said Bitcoin influencers that are looking for a job, if Brain and Chain Code don't hire you to do it, you could still do it on your own. I think some bridging between the sides here, I think it's just something we don't see, and because nobody else is doing it, I suspect that if someone will do it, it'll probably do pretty well. You could be the Bitcoin influencer whose entire, not you, Charlie, you already do it, but
I already do it. Yeah, I'm already out there. I'm in the arena.
Yeah, but I mean, for the listener, you could be the Bitcoin influencer who's, wholesome and trying to bring people together for once. I think that might actually be a good message because not many people are doing that. If Core is not going to explain themselves, maybe someone needs to decide that they're going to be the Bitcoin Core prophet on their own.
I appreciate that. Udi, final thoughts. I mean, if you have any final thoughts, call to action. What do you want to leave people with?
Yeah, just spam the chain. They just make op returns. I think that's great. I think that's that's what's expected of us.
It's way more fun, honestly. It's 10 times more fun to send a big old op return through Ben's bot than it is to get into another Twitter argument that gets me blocked.
It's fun, especially when people are looking, right?
Yeah. We all crave attention, and that gets attention. So,
yep.
Well, Udi, thank you so much for your time, and
of course. Thanks for having me.
I'll see you out at the various Bitcoin conferences in person, and I'll see you in the public arena called X.